Hey everyone, this is my UFC 316 recap video. I'm going to briefly go over all of the fights, but I'm also going to focus on my picks and look to see what was correct, what was wrong, were there robberies, were there fraud checks, things of that nature. And as you take a look to the right over here, you see that Marab clearly won. He won by submission. That was kind of a no-brainer. Coming into this fight, I thought O'Malley's behavior was strange, and I mentioned in my prediction video that it kind of struck me as he didn't want to say anything because he didn't want to put his foot in his mouth. He didn't want to talk trash because if he won, he could just play it off as though he was just confident and there was a new Sean O'Malley, a more colorful hair, just serious OG O'Malley. And if he lost, which he did, there wouldn't be any clips of him talking trash or, things of that nature where people would be clipping him, making a meme out of him. So that was the correct read. And then we had Harrison. Now this was another obvious pick because, I understand Juliana Pena's fighting abilities seem strange. She's just like an awkward fighter, brawler. Kind of like a DDP, but maybe without the same accolades, in the women's division she fights in. But another thing to consider was we knew Harrison was someone who can strike but likes to take people down, or she has the ability to take people down and hold them there. And we've seen Pena being held on the ground with, not too much ability to get up. And also, one thing I took into account was that Kayla Harrison on the scales looked like a skeleton. So she was clearly the bigger fighter, cutting the more weight to gain the bigger advantage once they stepped into the cage. Yeah, so that was an easy pick. And then we had Pfeiffer by decision. That was another kind of no-brainer. His loss to Jack Hermanson was a little concerning, but coming into this fight with Kevin Gastelum, we already knew Kevin fought most of his career at welterweight, and although he almost won the title, he's been fighting at 180 middleweight now, and I don't think it's because he necessarily thinks he's gonna win a belt there, or I think it's just because he has discipline issues in cutting his weight, because we already know he had those issues in the past, and now that he's getting older, that's not helping his case. So he can make 180 much easier, but he's going into these fights at a disadvantage, being the smaller guy. So unless Pfeiffer, I don't know if I can say this word, but I don't know if Pfeiffer took a dump in the bed, that was the only way he was gonna lose, because obviously the UFC is kind of on this streak of out with the old, in with the new, and Kevin, he had his chance, so now it's time for new faces. So it was clearly a kind of like a layup for Pfeiffer. Then this fight, the next one, Patchy Mix versus Mario Batista. Well, this was frustrating to watch. Now I'll admit, I only saw some highlights of Patchy Mix, and I know most people were going with Patchy Mix. And looking at his record, he was coming into this fight 20-1 versus, although Mario Batista was also 15-2. He had a nice record and big win streak. But I think I fell into that same boat where I just thought, oh, this guy from another organization with this record, and also I think he was the champion in that organization, coming in and fighting a guy who's not even top 10. Everyone thought this was a layup, kind of like a setup fight for Apache Mix to build his name. And I also thought maybe the UFC was punishing Mario Batista for holding Aldo up against the cage so much. So, yeah, I don't know if... I know Apache Mix had some excuses, like he wasn't used to all the extra fans in this arena. But this being the first fight I've ever seen him compete in, he looked horrible. His striking looked horrible. Yeah. Next, we had Kevin Holland versus Vicente Luque. Now, in this fight, I did think Vincent was going to win by submission based off of what RDR did to Kevin, and based off of how much Kevin Holland struggled with Gunnar Nelson, who's kind of up there in age and fights every few years. So it just boggles my mind. So I was initially thinking, oh, Vicente Luque is kind of washed up now, even though they're like similar age. He's kind of just been on the decline. And I was also considering Kevin usually has like the habit of going on a win-loss streak. So I thought it was just his time to lose since he got that decision over Gunnar. But yeah, he did better on the feet and snatched up a choke. I mean, what else is there to say? And then next, we had Joshua Van versus Bruno Silva. Joshua Van looked good. You know, there's a lot of talk about his age, which is kind of strange because, I mean, obviously he's young. We knew he was young when he had his first fight in the UFC, so I don't understand why people are making a big deal of his age now. I mean, if you're going to do that, you should have been doing that from the beginning. Seems like people haven't, or like they're just starting to realize who Joshua Van is, maybe. But yeah, he did great. Got the KO. So I did have this pick correct, but I thought it was going to be a little closer than it was. But I think I thought that because Bruno Silva has fought people like Manel Kape, more well-known names. So I thought his experience was going to play a big factor in this fight. But it didn't. And minus 715 odds were, I guess, justified. Next, we had Azmat. 1 KO in round 1. And you see up here, I had him by KO. And I guess I didn't get the round correct, or I didn't think I even picked the round. But yeah, I would have picked round 1. Yeah, he did what he did. I mean, it was a fighter with the last name ending in the OV. Big favorite, undefeated guy. So just my logic was that these kind of fighters, they like to set them up with easy fights or winnable fights. So that was kind of obvious. Then next we had Spivak, who got robbed. And they gave the decision of Waldo, who was clearly getting landed on a bunch more. Sergey was catching most of the shots, off on the side of his arms. He was covering up. Nothing like too significant was getting through to him. But he was the one landing the more effective damage. This is sad to see. on Twitter, you know, I put a post talking about how I don't understand why the fighters don't sue more often. And perhaps it's in their contract that they're not allowed to, but you know, that I don't think that necessarily stops you completely from attempting to sue. I'm sure someone could find a excuse to sue regardless, but when things like this happen, it affects your career negatively, affects your ability to earn a living. And not, you know, and also after these decisions, they never interview the judges to explain their decisioning. If they have a valid reason for weird decisions like this, then they should speak up, let everybody know. If it's valid, then it'll make sense, or at least they'll be held accountable in the future to make future decisions based off the same thing. So if they're like counting all the shots that are just landing on the arms of Sergey Spivak and they think that's effective, well then let everybody know. And then everybody's going to start doing that. They're not going to care if it lands flush. They're just going to be content with their strikes perhaps landing, but if it just hits their arms or doesn't get all the way through, they're going to start doing that too. So, but there should be an explanation. Someone should ask Dana about this. Next we had, so that was a robbery. Although, you know, you see up here I got that wrong, but I consider that a robbery, as most people do. Then next I had Chaos Williams, to win by KO. And he got beat up. I didn't know much about Andres. And I knew Chaos was tough. His last fight, he lost, but his striking was looking good. But Andres is a beast. He's a Viking. He says he likes to go full R. He was fun to watch. Always just fighting. When he's on the ground, he's looking to land damage. On the feet, just rushing in like a berserker. And then next, so yeah, I got that wrong. But I've seen him fight, so now I'll have more to go on in the future. Next, we had Kong Wang. Won a decision over Ariana. She looked better most of the fight. In the third round, she was getting landed on a bit more by Ariane Lipski. But, you know, not necessarily enough to make anyone think she was going to win or get a KO. I don't know. It was... I wish Ariane had done that from the beginning, but she didn't. And Kong Wang won. And also, I thought perhaps Ariane's weight miss was going to give her an advantage, because the card previous to this, the two people who missed weight, although it wasn't by like 6 or 7 pounds, the people who missed weight on the card before won their fights. So that was the only factor I was kind of worried about, but I still ended up picking Kong Wang. And then we had Ju Sang Yo having like a Conor McGregor-esque left hook knockout, which was very impressive. You know, you go ahead and go watch that fight. It's like 30 seconds. Yeah, so that one I got correct. That one, it was, you know, the odds are just telling the story. And I already knew Jekka. I've seen him fight, and I know he has power himself, but he gets landed on, and he got landed on. And then we had Salkild versus Yanal Ashmus. So Quinlan, I underestimated his last fight because it was his first UFC fight. And coming into this fight, I was still kind of hesitant. I thought maybe his debut was a fluke. It was against Jubli. And I've seen Yanal win fights just with his big power. Seen him survive fights and be tough the entire time. So I definitely didn't like the odds coming into this. But Yeah, I got the pick correct. I must say, if the fight was 5 rounds, I'm pretty sure Yanal would have won because Quillen was gassed in the 3rd round. Like, you could tell he was like kind of wobbly just from exhaustion when he was moving around on the feet at the end of the fight. So yeah, that's perhaps Yanal's mistake or his coach's mistake for not coaching him better through the fight. I mean, after the 1st round, they should have told him what DC was telling him, cage side. They should have said, don't wrestle. Don't look for takedowns. If you get kind of locked up with him trying to take you down, do everything you can to stay on your feet and find a moment to break away and keep the fight on the feet and just press him. So just from a viewer standpoint, it would have been more fun for us to see a fighter have a comeback win if his coaches had just coached him a little better. Or perhaps they did and he just wasn't listening. And then in the first fight, we had Markel Medeiros versus Mark Chonsky. Now, in this fight, Mark Chonsky, I don't want to give him too much credit because I don't want to, in the next fight, say, oh, he did good against Markel Medeiros. Because that's not necessarily the case. I think a better way to describe this fight was that Mark Chonsky was tough. And he showed big heart, despite getting landed on so much, taking brutal calf kicks, getting punched a bunch up everywhere, body, head. And he never gave up, never looked for a way out. So he's tough and he has a big heart. That's it. But Markel was clearly the better fighter, the better striker. I kind of was unsure about him. Despite this being Mark's debut, I was unsure about Markel because although I knew he was a well-rounded fighter, I thought he lost his fight against Austin Hubbard. Thought Austin Hubbard got robbed. But yeah, in this fight, Markel clearly won. So, I mean, that's the basic recap for these fights. But I want to say, on here, you see 9 out of 13. As far as my parlays, I had like 12 long shot parlays, like all basically picking 13 fights. And then I had maybe a couple that were like 7 or 6 fights. So all of them lost, okay? But I did have one that was 11 for 13. And the 2 that were wrong on that were Patchy Mix. And the other one was, what was it? Spivak? I believe it was Spivak. I'll have to go back and look. I'll post it in the comments down below. It'll be the pinned comment. But yeah, one of them was Patchy Mix, and I think the other was Spivak. And like I said, I'll double check. But if that's the case, I mean, technically that should have been like only one away from a perfect parlay. And that one I had like $5 to win like almost $900. So that's my betting style. That's what I like to do. And yeah, some more knowledge information was gathered, and I'll take into account for the next pay-per-view card. As far as fight nights or Apex cards, there seems to be a different thing going on betting-wise that I notice. As far as the outcomes, I don't want to get into it too much now. Still kind of observing, trying to do some research on past cards. So if anybody want a long shot parlay, let me know. If you had some solid bets, let me know. I'll go ahead and grab that piece of paper that shows my close perfect parlay, and then I'll put it what it was in the comments. And I'll see you later for my predictions for Buckley versus Usman. I'm just letting you know now, it's probably going to be Joaquin Buckley who wins. Like I said before, out with the old, in with the new.